Jeffrey Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel were socializing in a New York City nightclub in 2003 when I was first introduced and then targeted by them. In short, Jean-Luc Brunel was nothing short of a monster. He was not a very good person. He's been linked to Epstein through criminal records, affidavits, witnesses, photographs, flight logs. He visited him in prison, so there's the prison check-in logs. I mean, I could go on. In 2021, Brunel was formally charged with drugging and assaulting a 17-year-old in the 1990s. After being investigated and interrogated, the French magistrate did not find sufficient evidence at that time to proceed with human trafficking charges, but labeled Brunel as an assisted witness of aggravated human trafficking. If not for his untimely suicide, he would have continued to be questioned by French authorities and brought up on charges at a later date if and when new evidence came to light. Unfortunately, a dead person cannot be brought to court or face the consequences of his criminal actions, and his alleged victims will never obtain true justice. The court of public opinion seems to have deemed him guilty of the alleged crimes. In fact, he had a reputation of being extremely brutal with his victims. Brunel was and continues to be a crucial key in understanding Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring. Jean-Luc Brunel was a bouncing baby boy with brown hair and black eyes born to wealthy parents in 1946 in Paris, France. His father was a real estate executive, and he had one brother, Arnaud Brunel, but little else is known about his parents or childhood. There are allegations that Brunel wasn't his real last name and that he had it changed at some point during his life, but there is no known proof. However, it would explain the lack of available information, like his exact birth date, mother's name, and details regarding his education. Jean-Luc Brunel was introduced to me in 2003 as Jean, or Jean, which is how most people referred to him.
Although I bet other people could probably pronounce it better. I'm terrible with names. Sorry.
However, he was given the nickname
La Fontaine?
La Fantôme.
Doing a little too much Italian.
Le fantôme.
However, he was given the nickname La Fantôme.
Le fantôme.
Close.
By French investigators because he kind of just disappeared after Epstein's death as the investigation closed in on him. The investigators just couldn't find him.
He disappeared, kind of like Ghislaine Maxwell had.
Brunel married twice in his lifetime. First to a Swedish model who he later divorced in 1979, and then to an American model in 1988 who he later divorced as well. His second wife, Roberta, was only 20 years old when she married Brunel, who was over twice her age at the time. In line with his nickname, The Ghost, facts about his marriages and the possibility of children remain a mystery. Brunel was relatively small in stature, standing at about 5 feet, 8 inches tall and weighing only 143 pounds. Some suspect this is why he allegedly used drugs to subdue his victims before attacking them. His hobbies included things like modeling, photography, watching movies, and listening to music. However, he was most known for being a businessman, model agent turned Epstein associate, alleged sex trafficker, and pedophile and rapist. Brunel has always denied any wrongdoing, stating,
I strongly deny having committed any illicit act or any wrongdoing in the course of my work as a scouter or model agency's manager. I have exercised with the utmost ethical standard for almost 40 years.
According to reports, on a chilly, foggy night in late February of 2022, the 76-year-old man felt a deep sense of injustice as he awaited his trial.
Or he just felt guilty for what he did. Or knew that somebody else, or maybe he was just afraid of what was going to happen when he was in jail. He should have been. Or maybe somebody was after him, who knows? Regardless of the reason.
Things turned out the way they did. He went over to his bed, took his sheets off slowly, got them all ready, made a makeshift noose, placed his head inside, and lurched forward. Brunel was later found dead in his cell by guards.
Well, at least that's what we're told by authorities.
However, due to the similarities with the death of Jeffrey Epstein, there is public speculation that he may have been murdered. According to the New York Post, Brunel attempted suicide several times before his death, though. So it is possible that he did commit suicide. Brunel protested his innocence until the end. His lawyers said that he only committed suicide because of his deep sense of injustice and not because he felt guilty. Regardless, because Brunel died before his trial, he will forever be presumed innocent, as you can't prosecute someone that is no longer living. At 24 years old, the ambitious man began his career as a modeling scout for Karen Models in Paris. And then within 8 years, he became the head of the company in 1978. He is credited with turning the agency into a fashion powerhouse after discovering models like Christy Turlington and Sharon Stone. Brunel became known industry-wide as the person able to launch the career of young, aspiring models, while some stating that women would bend over backwards, including starving themselves to gain his favor. I wonder what else he had them do. In 1988, Brunel later partnered with his brother and founded the modeling agency called Next Management Corporation. They partnered with Faith Cates 2 years later to create Next Management Company. In 1995, Brunel founded Karen Models of America. Brunel was banned from his modeling agency in Europe after he was included in a BBC documentary report on abuse within the fashion industry in 1999. In the documentary, the girls talked about being snow-whited, which is slang for being drugged and assaulted. Brunel was also known to withhold the girls' visa cards and travel papers, threatening them with deportation if they didn't have sex with his wealthy clients while preventing them from leaving.
Every week, dozens of young American girls walk off airplanes in Paris and Milan, certain that their faces will be the next to beam from the covers of the fashion magazines. They are girls as young as 15 and 16, recruited by talent scouts or sent by their local modeling agencies. This is this man, the head of Karen Models, one of the largest and most prestigious agencies in the country. His name is Jean-Luc Brunel. And Sherry, who are not Ford models, Courtney and told us about the dinners he invites his other girls to attend with his male friends.
It's a meat market. You are there for the purpose of somebody wanting to take you home to bed. He is acting as a matchmaker. He's got the agency. He's got the girls. His friends say, oh, Jean-Luc, I'd like to meet some girls, or we're having a party tonight. Can you bring some girls?
And what happens if you say no?
You don't work.
You've actually known, be very careful on this, you actually have known that he has made someone pay a professional penalty for saying no.
I know. I paid a penalty for saying no. No. I was personally proposed to by himself, Jean-Luc, and I said, no way. I laughed in his face, and I had no more appointments, and I never worked.
What about the fact that people say when you come over here, you've come over knowing what you're getting into? I mean, everyone knows.
How can you know what you're getting into? How can you know what you're getting into? This is like a foreign country, you know? I mean, I'm from Florida, little city, Pompano Beach, you know? I mean, come on. How am I going to know what goes on in Paris, you know, or Milan? I mean, I don't even speak the language. I don't know anyone, you know? I'm in a new environment, you know? I don't know anyone. I have to trust the people that I come over here with. I mean, I'm naive, I'm young.
A lot of these bigwigs at the agencies literally have a scale where in this hand they have your career and in this hand they have what they want. And your career can go up if they get what they want. If they don't get it, your career goes down.
At discotheques like the Bandouche and the Palace, models are admitted free. When we filmed at the Bandouche, Jean-Luc Brunel was there. A number of models told us he has used cocaine heavily and offered it to the girls, along with help in their careers. Many of the girls who spoke with us said openly that they had been regular cocaine users. But some warned that there were things that went beyond cocaine. This one asked to be photographed in shadow. So you first met Jean-Luc Brunel in a nightclub when he offered you drugs, cocaine. And Jean-Luc, did he use drugs?
Oh, yes.
You say, oh, yes, a lot?
Well, that's why I used to like to see him, because he'd always give me a little vial of cocaine and say, you know, go have a good time in the bathroom. That was more or less, he did that with all the girls. And everyone else.
This girl told us a few years ago she went to Jean-Luc's house with a few of his friends. She said a powerful hallucinogenic drug was slipped into her drink, and that Jean-Luc kept urging her to go in and take a bath.
I started hallucinating, and at first, you know, I was very confusing because it was very scary, because if you don't know that you've been drugged and all of a sudden you start hallucinating, that's very scary.
She said she managed to get out of the house, but stayed disoriented for 24 hours. But this ex-model says several years ago she went to Jean-Luc's house and didn't get away. She asked to have her voice and face disguised.
He gave you a drink?
Yes.
You drank it, and then what?
I blacked out. I don't remember anything after that.
The next thing you remember
was being in this man's bed.
Who was he?
Do I have to say the name? It was Jean-Luc from Karen's modeling agency.
You were raped?
Yes, I do know that.
You're sure?
Yes, I'm positive. I know.
You think everybody knows this about Jean-Luc Brunel?
Oh, yes. A lot of people know that. A lot of people.
They continue to deal with him.
Everyone continues to deal with it. I don't know why.
Jean-Luc Brunel declined to give us an interview, but Eileen...
After being threatened with a lawsuit by the original Karen models, the one located in Paris that he had worked for, he transformed Karen Models of America into MC Squared, or MC2, located in Miami. To serve the greater market, he later opened offices, the one in Miami, New York, and another in Tel Aviv. However, the company was completely dissolved on September 17th of 2019, mostly because of these charges and allegations. And that's, I think, about the time that he decided to kind of go rogue and disappeared. In the 1980s, Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, introduced her to Brunel. They almost instantly bonded over their love for high society and
Underage girls.
She then later introduced Brunel to Epstein, and that's kind of how that trio got together. Epstein reportedly invested $1 million into Brunel's company, MC Squared, allowing Brunel to bring the agency to Miami and New York, which was near two of Epstein's primary residences. According to the bookkeeper, Maritza Vasquez, Brunel could move girls into the U.S. with relative ease. The girls were often brought to live in Epstein's East 66th Street apartment building in New York City. It is believed that Brunel received a finder's fee for every girl he brought to Epstein. As part of the evidence released to the public, it is apparent that they were in contact by phone message notes taken over the years, with one in particular depicting a message by Brunel left for Epstein stating, "He just did a good one, 18 years," and another stating, "He has a teacher for you to teach you how to speak Russian. She is 2 times 8 years old, not blonde. Lessons are free, and you can have first today if you call."
Because that's not weird. Not suspicious at all.
Brunel's name also appears over 25 times in the flight logs for the Lolita Express, which was Epstein's private plane, ranging from about 1998 all the way to 2005. They were often seen together by friends, acquaintances, and just the general public. There are lots of photos of them, pretty much everywhere, from high society events to just hanging out together, having a good time on the Lolita Express, as well as some of his estates and even Epstein Island. The most famous ones being those that were taken on the Lolita Express, where the three of them are hanging out, laughing, having a great time, and at some point, Maxwell decides to massage Epstein's feet. And in June of 2008, when Epstein was found guilty on one of 2 charges of procuring a prostitute under the age of 18, Brunel visited him a lot, I think over 70 times. And obviously there's records of that. According to Virginia Robert Gouffre's 2015 affidavit in her case against Jeffrey Epstein, Brunel sexually trafficked girls for Epstein between the early 2000s and about 2015. She claimed that Epstein bragged to her that he had slept with over 1,000 of Brunel's girls. In return, Brunel sued Epstein in 2015, claiming that he'd lost multiple contacts and business due to Epstein's illegal actions. He also alleged that Epstein had obstructed justice by directing him to avoid his deposition taken in the criminal case against Epstein by the Palm Beach Police Department. The lawsuit was later dismissed. In 2019, Brunel was again accused when named in court documents from a civil suit by Virginia Roberts Gouffre against Ghislaine Maxwell. The documents were unsealed on August 9, 2019, a day before Epstein's death. Gouffre alleged that she was sexually trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell to several high-profile individuals, including Brunel, while she was underage in the early 2000s. She also said that Brunel flew poor 12-year-old triplets, 12 years old, in from France as a sadistic birthday present for Jeffrey Epstein to abuse. The identity of these children have not been released to protect their privacy. Directly after, the French National Police launched an investigation into Brunel, and that caused him to disappear, hence the nickname The Ghost. In September of 2019, right after that investigation was launched, French police visited his offices and basically, looked all through him to see if they could find any indication of where he was, as well as any proof of the crimes that, he allegedly committed. A subpoena was then issued for Brunel on November 4th of 2020. On December 16th of 2020, only a few weeks later, Brunel was intercepted by police as he was about to board an airplane in Paris. He was then placed under custody and investigated by the French National Police. According to Paris prosecutors, Brunel was
suspected of having committed acts of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment on various minor or major victims, and of having in particular organized the transport and accommodation of young girls or young women on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein.
On September 2021, Brunel was formally indicted on a single count of rape. He was accused of drugging a model who was 17 at the time at a nightclub and raping her in the 1990s. Unfortunately, Brunel was not handed any human trafficking charges, which was one of the main lines of inquiry. The magistrate decided that there was not currently enough evidence to rule on that count. However, he was not acquitted or let off the hook and instead was given the status of
an assisted witness of aggravated human trafficking,
and could be charged later, and would have been if and when new information came to light. Multiple women have identified as victims and spoke to the police since the French probe opened. However, the investigation and prosecution of Jean-Luc Brunel are now closed due to his death. Some might say he avoided justice. It is unknown if any other civil allegations were brought against Brunel. Due to the difficulty of trafficking Brunel's past and his possible name change, it is theorized that there may have been other allegations or criminal charges brought against Brunel. During the very beginning of my college experience, I had went away to college and I befriended a girl that was super nice to me. I was kind of lonely, didn't know anybody, and she kind of took me under her wing a little bit and was chatting with me. And then a few weeks later, I ran into her again and she invited me to go to a club restaurant in New York City. And she, I kept kind of saying no because, I was afraid. I didn't want to go there and not be able to get in. I didn't really know these girls, but they kind of squashed every reason I gave. And eventually I kind of gave in and she said, my uncle basically owns the place. It'll be fun. It's probably much safer than going to a fraternity around here. So I ended up going with them when we got there, and I had no worries about getting in. I don't think they ID'd me or any of that. We just were walked up to the semi-private area, and there were a bunch of young girls kind of around, our age at the time, if not younger, because I remember scoffing at myself saying, I was afraid I was going to be able to get in here, these younger girls. And then there was this group of adults, and my friend went over to who she said was like, her uncle. And I remember him putting his hands on her knee. It was very inappropriate. When she came back over, actually, it was like, that's your uncle? And she's like, well, like a family friend. So it kind of made sense to me. The way she made it seem was like, some families, would rather you drink at home, like some parents then go out and do something silly. They'd rather, so it kind of seemed like that to me, like it was her, like uncle and the friends, and he allowed her to bring some friends out. So we were mingling, but I was eventually introduced to Jeffrey Epstein as well as Jean-Luc Brunel, and there was a couple other adults, I believe 2 men and a woman, that were there. And, then I went on to partying and doing some stuff and hanging out with the girls, got a little tipsy, and we're having fun. At some point when I was off by myself, Epstein had called me over, and the adults kind of just started talking to me, asking me about myself and my experiences and who I was and what my goals and ambitions were. And then next thing I know, they're kind of steamrolling me, offering me this opportunity of an audition or an interview. And again, they never really let you say no. And Epstein's like, oh, my friend here, meaning Jean-Luc Brunel, he could totally get you an interview. And it just went round in circles. And end result, they ended up kind of using that audition to then get me to where they needed to be alone in Epstein's house with him. But, it was all a ruse. Jean-Luc Brunel baited me just as much as Epstein. So for me, when I hear about this idea of, or these allegations against Jean-Luc Brunel, that he, would procure people for Epstein, it made a lot of sense because, the first person to kind of offer me this opportunity and to get me in was Jean-Luc Brunel. That was the first, he worked for this modeling agency, and he could, all these things. And he kept just, making it seem, oh no, you'd be beautiful, you're this, you're that. And I could offer you this, and just using all the right terms and stuff, and made it seem so real. And it wasn't until I kind of just kept denying. I didn't have very good self-esteem. I didn't think I could be a model, and I just kept denying it. And plus, I guess in some sense my alarm bells were going off. But eventually Epstein mentioned Victoria's Secrets, which back in 2003 was, they just kind of started advertising towards the younger kind of group and stuff, and the angel wings and stuff. And it was cool, and it kind of caught my attention. But still, again, I kind of said no. And between the two of them kind of pressuring me and then using my own words against me, the words that I had said to them when they were asking about my goals and aspirations, they would turn those words and those things against me by saying things like, well, if you really want, good opportunities, or you want to make the best out of your life and things that are handed to you, and you want a new start, a fresh new start to try new things, well, if that's really true, then you would say yes to this. And it just made you feel kind of guilty on top of that, because he just was very, gracious host and bought food and some drinks for us. And you finally just say like, okay, I guess so. But then when they were trying to convince me, they had me pretend to walk down a catwalk and show them my moves. And then they started doing this thing where they would touch my wrists, and if he could touch his pinky and his thumb, then I was the right size for modeling. And they would, just all these things that they were doing that were just very inappropriate, which I now realize is part of the grooming process. So, I never really saw Jean-Luc Brunel after that, but he did play a role in me getting swept up into that whole process. Epstein probably could have managed it on his own. Between the two of them, though, just kind of tag teaming me, and then also reaffirming each other's things. So when alarm bells would go off, at some point, Epstein groped me and then made fun of me because I got embarrassed and my face got red, and said how I can't be so prude if you're going to be a model. I look over and John's, making jokes and going his head too. And so I just think, okay, that's the fashion industry. And you kind of justify things. It wasn't until he then put his hand up my skirt and slightly inside me that I was done. I hate it. I can't even look at the camera after I say things like that. It's like no one's really there, but yet it's still just overwhelming. Embarrassing, really. But anyway, after that, I never really had any more contact with Jean-Luc Brunel, thank God. But as you may know already, or you'll come to find out as I continue to share my story, I did see Epstein again, and that did not end well. Now, I have absolutely no sympathy for him whatsoever. You know, Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the last videos I did, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Part of me, though, I can see how she went from one, her father to another man that just kind of manipulated and exploited her. I'm not justifying anything she did, but there's a slight part of me that hopes that she was manipulated into these things and can see how that's possible and can feel a little bit of empathy over that. With Jean-Luc Brunel, I have got nothing. I mean, nothing. He before he started all this and met Epstein, he built himself and his reputation and could have done anything. And instead, he decided to traffic girls to Epstein, allegedly. So my thoughts as a survivor of Epstein, Jean-Luc Brunel, for me, I have a personal rage. I can't begin to explain the anger I have and the embarrassment and the shame and I feel like a fool. Like the two of them just played me. They just played me like a fiddle. I really do think he was guilty of the things that he did. I can tell by just the small interaction I had with him, how sly and slick he would have been, how easily he would have been able to manipulate people. I mean, and on top of that, he had the reputation that he grew over the years that he could make a nobody into a superstar. He could make somebody who just, thought about modeling into this modeling superstar, and people would bend over backwards to get him to look at them, to help him, to take him, take those people under his wing. People would do anything. And I really think he took advantage of that.